I am doing a TikTok live again. I'm going to be reading from a short story from my recent collection, Short Songs. The story I'm going to read to you is called South Berkeley. It's one of my favorite stories in here. If you have been following me at all, basically, I've written a series of books about a wild punk named Sky Wright. And it's up to 5 books. I am working on book 6. And the fact of the matter is that there's a lot of supporting characters who've been in the book, and they're starting to grow and develop into their own characters. So I wrote this to give some of them their own stories. I have a book. It's by a character named Gust. She was a gutter punk. She still pretty much is. She lives indoors now. She used to be a homeless gutter punk. She is living in an apartment that is basically my character Sky Wright. She's become a successful musician. She's got her own record label and her own studio now. And she rents a couple apartments and she lets Gust and another punk named Shake live there. And yeah, this is about it. She appeared in one of my earlier novels. She appeared in my book, The Falling Circle, a long time ago. It was only the second book I ever wrote. And I revived her character and had her pop up again in the Sky Wright series. Because I liked her character. She's an obnoxious, crazy punk. I've known a lot of them. I'm going to read her story, her very own story here at South Berkeley. Quick trigger warning, there is some sex worker stuff in here. So if that makes you squeamish, you probably don't want to listen. But anyways, it's not gratuitous. But here goes. All right. She leaned back, letting her heavy head sink into her pillow. Her eyes fluttered as a calming, warm wave went through her neck and shoulders. Her half-opened eyes blanked out on the white ceiling as she let herself enjoy her fatigue. She brought her head back up as her laptop chimed loudly, letting her know that she had received another tip. Gus looked towards her webcam. She flexed her legs as the vibrator started to thrum, having been activated by one of her online viewers who had the ability to activate her pink and bulbous vibrator with the right amount of tips. She glanced at the camera and then looked at the feed as she lightly rubbed her nipples, which had been getting sore from all the work she had been putting in. She spent a few extra hours on Cam Portal because she wanted to make an extra special shopping trip. She wanted to surprise her roommate Shake, as well as her neighbor and de facto landlord Sky, with a chocolate cream pie from Sweet Adeline's, a bakery not too far from where they lived. Shake had been working a lot, always busy with her dog walking job as well as spending extra time at Butt Fork Studios, helping out their studio head and tech Larry, as well as helping out Colleen, the extra hyper studio hand whose job description had escaped Gust. She was not sure what Colleen's official job duties were and what exactly her title was. She only knew that the tall, skinny, and bespectacled Colleen was always working, darting around with the studio with papers or iPads or various inventory items such as liquor or band shirts. Once her vibrator stopped buzzing, she reached down and slowly pulled it out. She sat up and looked into her webcam. "Goodbye, my lovely," she said into the screen as seductively as she could. "I'll see you all tomorrow." She blew a kiss at the webcam and exited the feed. She slumped onto the bed and looked at her cam show numbers, which had been steadily climbing. She wondered what it would take to really go viral and start making more money. She spent a long time in the shower, soaping herself up repeatedly to peel off all of the lube and oil she had used on herself. She quickly dried herself off and got dressed. Feeling refreshed, she walked out onto the landing and heard Sky's pugs barking. She looked through her backpack, trying best not to look towards the door where the yipping pugs were pawing at the glass, making sure she had her wallet and her cell phone with her. As she stepped towards the stairs, the barking became more frantic, as Juan and Juanita kept scratching at Sky's door. Gus let out a long sigh and went back into her apartment to retrieve their leashes. She opened Sky's door and the pugs hopped and scurried around her in excitement. Taking the puggles for a quick walk, texted Gus to Shake and Sky as Juan and Juanita happened to sniff around the base of a little library. Gus poked around in the little library, telling herself she needed to get in more reading. It was not uncommon for her to see Sky or Shake with their noses in a book. Once she even found them sitting outside on a sunny day, sitting in chairs and reading books on the landing. She thumbed through a few mystery and fantasy novels, but none of them looked interesting enough to take along. She found a large, flat book full of poems, and she only needed to read one of them before she knew she had to take the collection of Simon Warwick Beresford poems with her. She brought the pugs and the book back to the apartments and set out once again. Tired from her cam session, she stopped at a nearby liquor store for a bag of chips and a candy bar, as she had forgotten, once again, to eat anything before she left her place. The walk to Sweet Adeline's was not so far or particularly close by, but she had plenty of time to kill before Shake or Sky got home, so she decided to take her time walking to and from the bakery. She was not only trying to get more reading in, she was working on being more zen, trying not to let her ingrained urban angst get to her so much. She realized that whenever she walked at a quick pace, that just about every part of her body was tense. She impressed herself with her self-reflection, coming to realize that the grinding urban landscape with whizzing cars and non-stop urban background noise was fueling her near non-stop attention. Her mind floated to her main line of work. She had toyed with the idea of expanding her erotic career, possibly bringing in a partner to play with, or maybe even trying to break into more hardcore work, such as performing in films. She wondered if she would even be able to land a role in an erotic film. She knew she was attractive enough for cam work, but she was not sure if she had what it took to get into films. She even wondered if she would be able to find a gig that paid well enough, as she had to admit to herself that she did not know very much about that particular industry. She thought about corning Miranda the next time she ran into her at Butt Fork Studios, and asked her for any advice she might have about moving into other areas of erotic work. The idea of working in a club rarely passed through her mind. She knew herself well enough to know that she did not have the temperament to work directly with clients. Her temper would not allow her to handle overly aggressive or problematic clients, and she easily imagined herself getting fired soon after getting such a job because of a customer altercation, most likely involving her punching someone in the nose. She avoided the main street of Alcatraz to walk the quieter residential side streets. Not that the side streets were necessarily stress-free or quiet. One still had to pay attention to whizzing cars, bicyclists, and other potential urban hazards, but they were not nearly as grating as the main thoroughfares. Walking slowly along as she chewed on her sour cream and onion chips, she looked around the Berkeley houses. It had been a working-class neighborhood at one point, populated by regular people who worked regular jobs. Even college students used to live in South Berkeley. The spiraling out-of-control cost of rent and the rocketing price of houses drove them all out. She knew the people living there were either longtime Berkeley residents who had hung onto their houses through the drastic increase in the cost of living, or they were tech workers with six-figure salaries. As she looked over the primed and primed houses, she imagined what the people who lived there were like, how they spent their time hunched over computers, making more money than she could ever imagine making. She speculated that they were the kind of people who spent more time thinking about what kind of wine they were going to have with whatever gourmet fish they were going to devour than anything else. She noted that some of the houses had been split off into separate living dwellings. A large house that looked as if it could have been a single-family home at one point would now have a row of mailboxes, where the downstairs doors would have apartment numbers on them, reminding Gus that they were not all techie scum, that some people were slicing up their houses in order to survive. Other houses had all the looks of being a single home. They usually had fresh paint, new fences, and an air about them that reeked of money. She slowed down as she passed up a 2-story house on a corner. It was quite large and elaborate, with dark plum paint and even darker trimmings. It had all the feel of an older house, with a witch's hat on the corner. It was such a grandiose and elaborate looking place that she wondered what the inside looked like. Then she saw the flat metal mailboxes on the porch. The place had been partitioned into different living spaces, rather than remaining its own stately manor. She kept observing houses as she walked along, noting things people did with their gardens, such as bushes of roses, or carefully placed collections of cacti arranged in such a way as to accentuate a stairway or a walkway. Some front yards had trellis entrances. Occasionally there were pieces of artwork, such as statuettes, or pieces of hanging ceramic art, such as suns with faces, or animals like frogs or fish. She took some time to look at a pristine 3-story house that had a wide staircase leading up to a front door. It had smooth concrete paths around the front yard that was surrounded by an elegant picket-type fence. The lawn and garden were carefully crafted and manicured. Bright and starry lights shone through the fine paneled window panes. She noted someone glaring at her through one of the windows from the second floor. He was an older man with a receding hairline. No doubt he was someone who worried she was casing the place, or he was just being suspicious. She fought the urge to flip him off, choosing instead to slow her pace, just to irritate him further. She kicked up a few leaves as she shuffled along the sidewalk, determined to keep her casual pace. A few squirrels ran across her path as she admired an actual white picket fence in the front yard of another house. Her thoughts turned to her own living situation. Gust was glad that she had a place to live, even if she had to share it with a friend. Most of her life she had lived in 2 small apartments, usually crammed with roommates who occupied nearly every spot that could be converted into a living space. She almost found living on the street or living in rent-free squats to be less stressful, not having to constantly worry about how she was going to come up with rent or keep up with such places with such limited funds. Her childhood was the same. Gust and her mother, along with her little brother, were constantly moving when she was a child, from one small studio to another tiny apartment to another house full of people. More than a few times they all ended up having to share a room, her sleeping on the right side of her mother while her little brother was on the left. There is no way on heaven or earth that Gust could ever forget the cascade of emotions that ran through her when she finally ran away at the age of 14. Taking off to hang out with gangs of homeless punks. Her mind had been a torrent of near constant fear and elation, among other stormy emotions during that time of her life. She realized she was stress walking again, her tight shoulders and her balled up fists. She could even feel herself straining her calves. She forced herself to lighten her pace. Her mood became anxious when she saw Sweet Adeline's up the street. She skittered quickly up to the bakery in anticipation of her purchase. Gust nearly flinched when she saw a thin woman with long, ragged, light brown hair sitting on the large roundabout planter just outside the bakery, her head down in a book with a cup of coffee sitting next to her. She was dressed in a traditional all-black clothes, with her knees pressed together and her shoulders slumped as she hung onto a book as if it were a heavy weight. Even though her scraggly wild hair covered her face, Gust immediately recognized her pale and thin friend. Gust walked up to her. "Bootsky, what's the haps?" Bootsky looked up suddenly, as if she were startled. "Holy crap, what's up, Gust?" smiled Bootsky. "I haven't seen you since Mention Park." "No shit, it's been that long?" asked Gust as she racked her memory, trying to remember the last time she had seen her. "Have a sit, tell me what's up." Gust unshouldered her backpack and sat down. "What you doing in this part of town?" "I'm staying in a warehouse, just off of Sacramento. Got a bed in a studio." Gus remembered that Bootsky was one of those people who always bounced between homelessness and house. Bootsky was always finding places to stay, but always in less than ideal circumstances. Occasionally she would stay at a squat, but she frequently sweet-talked people into letting her dwell in their basement or sleep in an extra bed or couch for a short stretch of time. "What you doing around here?" asked Bootsky as she set her book aside. "You live here now?" "Got a place down in San Pablo. My friend Sky has let me crash there." "Sky?" "Sky Wright." "You mean the shredder for the dynamite chicks?" "Yeah." Bootsky shook her head around. "You're friends with her?" "Ain't everyone? I mean, you know her well enough that she's giving you a place to stay?" Gus leaned back. "Not me so much. She's friends with Shake. Me and her share a place." "Got it," said Bootsky with a slow nod, as if she didn't quite believe what Gus had told her. "So, you working? What you doing for money?" Gus tossed her head towards the bay. "Got some work in San Francisco, doing work at Butt Fork Studios." "No shit." "No big deal. Just office work kind of crap, and scouting bands." Bootsky turned to face Gust. "You're a scout for Butt Fork?" "Yeah." "Holy shit. How the hell did you get that gig?" Gus could have sworn a couple of people sitting at the tables next to the bakery had glanced in her direction when Bootsky mentioned Butt Fork. She looked back at her friend. Bootsky had always been thin. Even her eyes, nose, and lips looked thin. But Gus thought she looked even thinner and more pale than she had ever looked. "It's really not that big a deal," said Gus. "Sky wanted someone in the scene to check out new talent. You know, everyone in the scene knows who she is. She wanted some people who were still down in the dirt to scope out bands for the label." "You get paid for that?" "Kinda. It's not a lot of money." "But you split the rent." "Yeah, Shakes walks dogs. She makes some pretty good cabbage from that." Gus narrowed her eyes at Bootsky. "What about you? Where you living?" "I got a little place in an art commune. It's like down by the Oakland border. I got a little loft I stay in. It's in a studio. I gotta walk around to get to the kitchen and the bathroom, but it works." "Sounds kinda weird." Bootsky pursed her lips and dropped her head. "It'll do for now. I can't stay there forever though, especially because all of the paint fumes." "You got work? You making money?" Bootsky suddenly lifted her head. Gus thought that she had shuddered a bit. I'm looking for a new job. I was doing that inventory thing. Over at the collection of restaurants, over by the gourmet ghetto." "What?" Bootsky waved a hand. "It was just some kind of part-time temporary thing." "Sure." Gus eyed the bakery. There were only a few people in line. "Hey, I gotta grab something for my house." "Sure. You still got the same number?" "Nah, it's new one." Bootsky gave Gus her new number and she dropped her nose back into her book as Gus went into the bakery. She was not sure why she did not tell Bootsky about her webcam job. Back during her runaway days, she would talk to Bootsky about everything, even the sordid details of her wild sex life. For now, she could not decide why she was keeping so many of her life details from her. Gus glanced back at Bootsky. She shuddered as she felt a cold wave go through her. Gus searched the cake and pie case. A young woman with tied-back light brown hair walked up behind the case. "Can I help you?" "No more chocolate creams?" "I'm sorry," said the young woman. "We sold the last one this afternoon." "What's that one?" said Gus as she pointed to a pie topped with white cream. "That's a coconut cream." Gus settled her eyes on the white cream of the pie as she lamented having missed out on a chocolate cream pie. "I think I'll take that one." "Okay, a slice?" "Nah, the whole thing." The woman paused for a moment as if she were surprised. "Certainly." After carefully removing the pie and preparing it, she handed the box to Gust. "Can I get a bag? I gotta carry it back a ways." "Sure." At the last minute, Gus bought an almond croissant. She was going to give it to Bootsky, but when she came back out, Bootsky was nowhere to be found. She carefully walked back to the apartments, balancing the pie bag so she would not mar her purchase if it tilted too much. She decided to eat the almond croissant as she walked. Pausing by the house with the wide porch once more, she slowed down and looked at all of the fine detail. Looking down the side of the house, she saw how far back it went, covering a wide swath. She wondered how many rooms the house had. She surmised that it had to have at least 3 bedrooms. Her mind drifted inside the house, wondering what it would be like to live there, imagining how it would feel to actually own such a place. She would go from room to room, once she had acquired the place, and decide where her bedroom would be, and what she would do with the other rooms. She would designate one to be a guest room, and another to be a library and a study of sorts, where she would start collecting books. She would get a big easy chair to sit in while she read. The house looked as if it had a decently large basement. She imagined turning it into a party room with couches and huge television set and video games. Or maybe she could convert it to a small studio so she could invite her friends over for jams. Maybe even get Sky or Miranda to teach her a few things so she could be a better musician. She imagined it would be large enough to turn it into a party room or a musician studio, or possibly both. Her mind drifted to filling the place up, choosing what kind of furniture would go into the living room and what kind of things she would get for the kitchen. She knew there was no way she could have such a large and elaborate place without finding enough art for the walls, buying paintings and installations from all of her crazed and twisted art friends, as well as putting up show bills and club flyers throughout the house. Her mind cycled through the possibilities. A large wall of records covering one wall in the living room, rescue cats sleeping and skulking all through the house, with her falling asleep to a pile of cats every night. Her mind whirled with ideas, how she could be drunk with living space, and what she would have to do to fill such a large house to make it her own and have it come alive. She felt her heart twist up and drop as the sharp eyes of the receding hairline appeared in the window once again. She glared back at him with narrow eyes, trying her best not to scowl so he wouldn't have the satisfaction of knowing he got to her. A jolt went through Gust. She stopped in front of the house and looked right at the man. She lifted up her hand and stuck her tongue between 2 fingers, waggling her tongue at him. The man scowled and disappeared from the window. Gus resisted the urge to wait and see if he came out, as she did not want anything to happen to the pie. She kept walking, trying as much as possible to push her house daydreams out of her mind. She had never lived in such a place, and she could not even imagine being able to ever afford such a place. So she wondered why she was torturing herself with such thoughts. She let her mind rumble as her shoulders got tight. She walked faster. Getting back to the apartment, she was finally able to let her mind go blank as she trudged up the stairs. She started when she realized someone was at the landing. "Hey, Gust, what's up?" "Sky, you're back early." "I can't spend all my time at that studio," said Sky as she opened her door and the pugs ran out. "Thanks for walking my doggos." They kind of guilt-tripped me into it." "No doubt. What's in the bag?" Gus set down the bag and took out the box. "I bought us all a pie." "Really? A whole pie?" "From Sweet Adeline's. I wanted the chocolate cream, but they only had coconut." Sky looked at the box. "Damn, Sweet Adeline's. Fuck yeah. I wanted to treat you guys. You didn't need to get us a whole pie." "I wanted to," said Gus, looking down at the pie. "I made plenty of cam money this week, so I wanted to splurge. You know when Shake's coming back?" Gus shrugged. She should be back soon, maybe in like an hour." Sky looked down at the pie. "Fuck it. I got some cod I was going to cook up tomorrow, but I'll make it tonight. We can pig out." "Fuck them diets," smiled Gus. "Let's get fat." "Hell yeah," smiled Sky as the skittering pug started sniffing the pie box. that was my story, South Berkeley. If you missed the front, I do have this story up on my blog, needlepictures.com. Needle pictures is a euphemism for tattoo. So that story is up on my blog. You might have to go down a few posts to find it, or just search for South. And anyways, that was my story, South Berkeley. It speaks a lot to what's going on in the Bay Area right now with all the gentrification. Just how it's driving people out and how it's making people's lives much more difficult. I had to leave the Bay Area after the pandemic. I could no longer afford to live there. I'm currently living in Reno. I'm slowly building back up my income. I'm hoping to go viral as a writer and become a professional writer. That's what I would really like to do. But this is the book, Short Songs by Jeffrey Vernon. Whoops, that's not my name. There's my name. Jeffrey Vernon Matica. I don't even know my own book covers anymore. So it's really easy to find me. My last name is kind of weird. Matucha. Short Songs, Tales from the Punk Side. South Berkeley is pretty much the way I described it in this story. Berkeley in general, the Bay Area in general. Berkeley is one of the most expensive cities to live in right now. It is just insanely expensive to live there. The house prices have gone through the roof. Rent is just bone-crushingly high. Housing has been a problem in the Bay Area for a long time, but it has gotten so much more worse. And I wonder, it has to break at some point because more and more people are leaving the Bay Area because they simply can't afford to live there. So, like I said, South Berkeley is pretty much as I described it. Sweet Adeline's is an actual bakery in South Berkeley. One time I was on my way to a potluck. And I didn't have anything to bring. I didn't have any time to make anything, so I just stopped by and I bought a chocolate cream pie from Sweet Adeline's. And I took it to the party. And then a few months later, when they were having another party, the host of the party said, "Could you please stop by Sweet Adeline's and buy another chocolate cream pie?" Because they liked it so much, they were like, "Buy it again." Yeah, buy it again. Go buy Sweet Adeline's. Really excellent bakery. Really cool. It used to be a cafe. There used to be a cafe in there. You can go and sit there and work on your novel or just drink too much coffee and read a book. They got rid of the cafe part, so there's a couple of tables outside, but it's just not the same. I'm going to be in Berkeley next week. I'm going back there for the holidays and to help out one of my parents. And yeah, it's gonna be good to get back there. It's not the same old Berkeley, like I said, but that's one of my favorite stories from this book. I really like the character Gust and what she thinks about. But that's one of my favorite stories from this book. I really like the character Gust and what she thinks about. But that's one of my favorite stories from this book. I really like the character Gust and what she thinks about. But that's one of my favorite stories from this book. I really like the character Gust and what she thinks about more. And finally you get evicted and you end up having to look for a new place. And I just knew tons and tons of people who are constantly moving. Like, they would only stay in places for 6 months or a year or a couple of years, and then they'd be forced to move again because of the rent got too high, or they simply couldn't keep up with the rent they had. My rent's kind of high, but it's not as high. Like I said, I live in a one-bedroom apartment in Reno. And this place, if this exact place was in Berkeley or San Francisco, it would be at least twice as expensive. More likely 2.5 to 3 times more expensive than it is now. If this apartment, if this exact same apartment was in San Francisco, it would be at least twice as much, if you were lucky. Probably more than that, which is insane. It's like, why does this place have to have such a variable rate? Like, if this apartment was in a very poor part of a southern state, it might be half as much. But if the same place was in San Francisco, it would be 3 times as much. It's just nuts. It's just crazy. And so I just don't want to tell stories. This is a genuine story from the heart. It's about life's little victories for people who are struggling. And her splurge was to buy an entire chocolate cream pie. She ended up with a coconut cream pie, but she wanted to buy a whole pie from a nice bakery. And to her, that was an event. That was a win. That's something that a lot of people take for granted. But, yeah. Anyways, that's one of my stories. I will be back on another live to read several more stories. Like I said, short songs by Jeffrey Vernon Matica. There's a link to one of my books in my profile. I think I had either my Skywrite Rise and Fall book there, but I thought I changed to my link tree. I'm not sure. I have to go look. I'm sorry, I've been really busy, and I'm starting to forget things. Like, what link do I have on my TikTok? It might be my link tree. If it is, it'll take you to my authors page. You can look up the short songs books. You can see my Skywrite series of books. And yeah, thanks for letting me read to you. And in any case, live from Reno. And whoops. I'll see you soon.